We've talked about the reasons behind the rise in gun violence in Portland and the impacts it's having on families. So now, let's focus on the guns that are being used in all these shootings.
Why do we argue about the sanctity of life, but we allow guns to be easily accessed by people who aren't mature enough to use them?
And if you need any more evidence that the Portland Police Bureau is stretched thin, just look at their new policy for pulling people over.
Let's get the folks, concentrate our efforts on those who are truly putting the public at risk.
Also, I bet you're staring at that weather app on your phone and wondering, is it really actually going to get that hot this weekend? Hope your AC's working. Here's the story.
Okay, all right. Gotta button up. Time to get serious. Thanks for being with us. I'm Dan Haggerty. I appreciate your time as always. All the ways to communicate with us at the bottom of your screen. Use that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. You can send us an email at thestory@kgw.com or what are the other ways? Well, there are other internet sites. Instagram, Facebook. We're on all those. All right. MySpace. Is there still a MySpace? I don't know. We're probably on there if there is. Anyhow, why don't we get to the big story? I know you know what it is. Now, we heard from a lot of you after our gun violence special last night, and many of you pointed something out to us, saying for a special about gun violence, there really wasn't a whole lot of talk about guns. Amy wrote in and said, what, no mention in your coverage of easy access to guns? And Marty said, I also thought the availability of firearms should be discussed. So that's what we're going to do. And we took a look at the numbers, and it is true, 2020 was a huge year for guns in America. Kristen Severance explains what the data shows.
By almost all accounts, 2020 was a record-setting year for gun sales in the United States. The FBI conducted almost 40 million firearm background checks last year. That's over 11 million more than the year before, and the most since the FBI started keeping track in 1998. But the number of background checks isn't necessarily the number of guns sold. That's because national background checks may be required in instances that don't involve a gun sale. And multiple firearms could be purchased on a single background check, but they can indicate trends in gun sales. According to a firearm trade group, there were 21 million background checks for the sale of a firearm in 2020. Of those, an estimated 40% went to people buying a gun for the first time. Here in Oregon, the numbers were also staggering. State police conducted almost 420,000 background checks in 2020. That's more than 140,000 compared to the year before. And in March alone, Oregon State Police approved over 50,000 firearm transactions. That's the highest monthly total for the year. It's also the month coronavirus arrived in Oregon. Now, all of that information relates to people going through the process of trying to legally obtain a gun. We're not talking about people using stolen guns or the illegal guns already on the streets. The FBI has done a lot of research on this, and they've pointed out several times how one gun can be responsible for dozens of shootings. And that's happened in Portland several times over the last 2 years. According to data from the FBI, an estimated 1.2 million guns were stolen from individuals from 2012 to 2015. The actual number is probably much higher because mandatory reporting laws really vary from state to state. But many of those guns go straight to the black market where they're used over and over again. We talked to Royal Harris, an activist in Portland and a former gang member who now tries to help others out of that life. And we asked him how the prevalence of guns and the availability of guns, both legal and illegal, plays into gun violence.
I guess it's a both, and I guess any of these where we look at the root cause in the variable is a both and, because again, that means we have to look at the issue of why do we, a country of 337 million people, have 3 guns for every individual? Why do rent-a-car agencies understand because of the development of the brain, they won't give you a car till you're 25, but you can get a rifle at 18 and a pistol at 21? Why do we argue about the sanctity of life, but we allow guns to be easily accessed by people who aren't mature enough to use them, or people who in times of conflict use them on a spouse, on someone they don't know, or out of fear? Not fear of mortal threat, but fear of a culture of people who don't look like them invading their comfort. Again, none of these are comfortable conversations, but these are the conversations we have to have if we really want to address the issue of violence. And again, I'm a real big person on, if we got rid of every gun, the stories we'd be doing right now about knives and machetes. So as long as we don't focus upstream, we just recycle the stories about downstream.
Now, we also talked to Harris about possible solutions to stop the gun violence in our city, like peer mentoring and community intervention programs. And you can watch all of that in our special, Understanding Gun Violence. It aired last night at 6 o'clock here on The Story. It's on YouTube right now. If you missed it, please take a look. And I know a lot of you have a ton of questions about this topic, as you should. I know you do because you care about the community, especially about police and what police are doing and the role that they play and how cuts to the Bureau have impacted all of this. And we are working on those stories right now. So please keep sending in your thoughts and your questions and using that hashtag #HeyDan. But right now I do want to talk about something else involving Portland police. You might have seen this announcement yesterday. Portland police officers will no longer stop drivers for low-level traffic violations. That includes things like, expired plates or equipment failures, stuff like a brake light is out, stuff like that. Instead, police are going to prioritize traffic stops where safety is at an immediate risk, like speeding or distracted driving or drunk driving. Okay, Maggie Vespa joining us now. Maggie, break this down for me. I want to start with the simplest kind of question here. Why are they doing this? What is the motive for making these changes?
Yeah, well, it depends on who you ask, because in that press conference yesterday, we had Mayor Ted Wheeler and we had Police Chief Chuck Lavelle, and each one kind of highlighted a different motive. So there's a bit of a dual rationale here. On the mayor's side, he said, look, we're trying to basically combat the trend, and we all know this to be true. There's a lot of data that shows that traffic stops disproportionately impact Black drivers, and he said the city of Portland wants to combat that. So by doing this, that will be accomplished. And then you had the police chief who didn't dispute that by any means, but he kind of led his portion of the press conference by saying, look, we don't have the resources to police every crime that we used to. And basically, frankly, we have to put our resources, allocate them toward issues of public safety. So if these are, he told us officers will use discretion in deciding when safety is an issue. But he said, basically, if you're driving and you see somebody with a headlight, say that's out during the day, or expired tags on their license plates, that's not an issue of safety. Officers don't need to be stopping these people, and we don't have enough officers, again, to police every kind of crime and infraction and offense. And so he said that's the reason. We just don't have enough officers, point blank. So two different sort of rationales offered. I don't
even need to open our inbox right now to tell you that I can already read in my head the emails that we're going to get from people who are saying this makes them nervous. Here's another example of police not being able to fully do their job in a city that a lot of people see as getting more unsafe.
Yeah, exactly. And I put that question almost word for word to the mayor. I said, I will bet money, and you know this to be true as well, that we're going to get people saying, look, this isn't about racial justice or social justice movements of the moment. This is because Portland doesn't have enough police officers, point blank. And I said, and we're going to have people saying this is proof that the budget cuts last year went too far, $15 million from the Portland Police Bureau. And so I asked him, what do you say to people who say this is just proof that the city of Portland does not have enough officers? And here's what he said.
What I tell them is the truth, which is we have a scaled down police bureau. I have long said that our staffing on the streets is inadequate. And that's one of the reasons I would not support further reductions in the Portland Police Bureau budget. That's why I continue to advocate for adequate staffing of our Portland Police Bureau. But with reduced staffing, that means we need to focus on protecting the public's safety. So this is a better allocation of resources. Let's get the guys who are speeding. Let's get the guys who are operating a motor vehicle under the influence. Let's get the folks, concentrate our efforts on those who are truly putting the public at risk.
Okay, there you hear it. And if anybody has any opinions on that, please let us know. Use that hashtag #HeyDan. Now, Maggie, moving on to another topic here. It comes to searching a driver's car. We're seeing some changes with that as well. What can you tell us?
Yeah, exactly. So that was the second directive, basically. And Police Chief Chuck Lavelle said, we're also going to be telling officers that if they do pull someone over and they decide that they want to search that driver's car, they're going to have to directly, explicitly inform that driver that they can decline, that it's up to them to say, no, you can't search my car, and then the officer won't be able to do it. And further, they are now directing officers to record audio of that exchange, because as we've reported, Portland is the only major American city where police officers do not wear body cameras. So basically the thinking, the chief said, is if someone says, yeah, sure, you can search my car, and then later on they want to dispute that claim, Portland police want a record of that person having consented. So again, they will be recording audio when they ask drivers if they can search their vehicles.
Got it. Maggie Vespa with the details. Thank you. Okay, make sure your air conditioning is working. Are you enjoying the hot weather? No, you're not. If you're not a big fan of the heat, you're probably not going to like what we're about to show you. You might have seen this viral tweet from a meteorologist in Atlanta about a so-called heat dome that could form over the Pacific Northwest next week. He said it could mean, quote, obscene temperatures, whatever that means. It doesn't sound good. Over 100 degrees in parts of Oregon and Washington. But before you go out and buy up all the fans and air conditioners in town, let's get some context here with our chief meteorologist, Matt Safino. Is this a heat dome? Is that a thing? Did he make that up?
No, what Ryan's doing is, you've heard the term a dome of high pressure, right? So that's what he's talking about. This one happens to be large and intense and is going to last a while, but it's kind of like when we had the polar vortex several years ago. That term had been in the meteorological language for decades, but somebody put it into Twitter and it became a thing around the nation as if it was brand new. This isn't brand new, but this setup that we're going into is extreme, especially for this time of the year.
Dome of high pressure. I've heard that. I've heard meteorologists say that, but
Sure.
Heat dome's it's catchy.
It's catchy.
He's onto something.
I got to give him some credit for the branding there.
Let's talk about the extreme temperatures because I guess they will be pretty extreme for this part of the country.
Yeah, one thing he did there is he mentioned that basically he was quoting the raw model output from the European model, and some of the other models are doing the same thing. And some of those numbers really are ridiculous. So I liken this to in the wintertime when we know we have a snowstorm coming. Several days out in advance of said event, I'll see the model output showing like Portland's going to get 20 inches of snow. And it'll do that for a couple of days. Then by the time you're like 1 day away from the event, it's going to be, okay, it's 1.5 inches. Right. So that's what I'm expecting to happen with these ridiculous numbers that we're getting from the models, which I don't even quote because I think it's a little too sensational. It's not realistic, and I'm not forecasting that. So why would I talk about it? Because then people just go, it's going to be 120, and they freak out.
You know the game of telephone or Twitter phone or whatever.
Exactly.
Works.
So that is not what's going to happen. It is going to be. We are going to be flirting though with Portland's all-time record high temperature, which is 107, which was set 3 times. Twice in 1981, August 8th and 10th, once in 1965 in late July. Notice the timing of that, though, Dan, late July, early August. That is typically our hottest time of the year. So to get this really hot weather now, one of the things I'm concerned about is the simple fact that our days are a lot longer now. We just passed the solstice. So our days are as long as they get, which means there's more time for heating, less time for cooling down from this excessively hot weather. So it's going to be more unbearable just in terms of the livability of it all.
Not just the daily hours, but then the day after day after day, because it's not like a spike and then it cools down again.
Yeah, it's not like it's a 1 or 2 day deal like we just had. It's like, okay, it's going to cool off like it did today. The last time we had 3 days in a row of triple digit heat was 2009. That was late July as well. 2 of those days we hit 106. And I was forecasting here then, we thought we were going to break Portland's all-time record high of 107 back then. We were forecasting, I remember forecasting like 108, 109. We ended up getting some high clouds coming in, kept us at 106. So we didn't, oh boy.
A chilly 106.
Yeah, right. So we didn't set the all-time record high, but I'm forecasting 105 right now for Sunday and 103 on either side of that. We're within a few degrees of that 107 mark. So we may very well end up at 108 or 109, which would be a new all-time record.
And then the triple digits are kind of bookended by
95 plus, which means 5 days in a row over 95. That's a long time for us to be that hot.
All right. Matt Safino, thank you, sir.
You bet.
You know what we don't need as we recover from a global pandemic? How about another mysterious disease outbreak happening this time at a Portland apartment building, and no one can figure out exactly what's causing it?
Everybody's stressed out. Everybody is.
When the story continues.
Welcome back. All right, keep sending in those thoughts with the hashtag HeyDan. Email the story at kgw.com. Lots to talk about, discussing gun violence, the hot weather, tons of stuff going on, including this. And it's something I hope you get involved in or share to some people who you might think want to. It's our Hey Help campaign, and this week we are asking you to consider donating to One Tail at a Time PDX. It's a dog rescue. It's in Portland, and they help a lot of dogs. Last year they rescued more than 350, and your donations help them to pay for all of the stuff it takes to do that, the food and the medicine and the shelters and the spaying and the neutering and all these really important things to help get these animals adopted. To donate, just open the camera on your phone, aim it at that QR code on your screen, or go to kgw.com/heyhelp and it'll give you a link to donate. We're calling this a micro donation drive. No pressure to give some big amount. You know, a lot of people have just been giving a little amount each week to whichever thing we're profiling that they think they'd like to get involved in. Feel free to do the same, and thank you to everybody who has helped out. Now, as if the pandemic hasn't already given us enough to worry about, how about the nearly 100 residents in North Portland? They're worrying about something else, Legionnaires disease. All right, at least a dozen people there have gotten sick at the Rosemont Court apartments. One woman has died. Now, 6 months after this outbreak first was detected, health officials still, at this point, have not figured out the source. Here's investigative reporter Kyla Boshi.
This is not the goodbye that Jane Foreman had hoped for.
Well, you know, nobody likes to move. I do not want to be leaving, friendships that are 10 and 11 years old.
After more than a decade at Rosemont Court, a place she loved.
Horrible process. Nobody enjoys it, but
the 71-year-old
not fun.
Is moving out.
No, I don't want to be leaving, but the Legionnaire situation really concerns me. I feel my health is at risk. I think the picture of these system filters are in the elevator. And
despite efforts to fix the building's water system,
here's the pictures of the filters.
Residents at the North Portland apartment complex are still getting sick with Legionnaire's disease.
Yeah, it's
a severe form of pneumonia or lung infection. Since January, at least 13 residents have been diagnosed with the illness, several hospitalized, and one woman, 74-year-old Lucy Schneider, died.
It's just very stressful.
Everybody's stressed out.
I went to see a psychologist.
Everybody is.
We are a community.
Nearly 100 seniors live in affordable housing at Rosemont Court in North Portland.
It's a community.
The apartment complex is owned by the nonprofit Northwest Housing Alternatives. In early January, Multnomah County Health urged residents to temporarily leave and put them up in hotels after several people became ill with pneumonia-like symptoms. Legionella, the bacteria that causes Legionnaire's disease, can form in stagnant water and then disperse through the air and be inhaled when, for example, a shower or tap is turned on.
Every time you turn on a faucet to wonder, is that aerosol, am I breathing that aerosol into my lungs?
Over the past few months, professionals have run chlorine through the water system to destroy any potential bacteria, installed a disinfection system, and added filters on faucets in the apartments.
The flow is, I don't know.
Which slows water to a trickle.
Little more than dripping.
Despite all these precautions,
that's how we've been living since late March.
3 additional residents have gotten sick. One in March, one in May, and another in June, leaving health officials stumped. 6 months after the first few cases of Legionnaire's disease were detected at Rosemont Court.
Been driving us crazy. We just don't know.
They still haven't figured out the source of this outbreak.
What has made it so difficult in determining a source here?
It can hang around in pipes anywhere where water is slowed or stagnant, and it can get shaken loose in ways that we may not completely understand and then come out of somebody's faucet or shower head.
It was December the 10th that started the nightmare.
Residents have wondered if the outbreak might be connected to nearby construction activity, the replacement of a fire hydrant in early December. They were warned to boil water for a day as a precaution. The Water Bureau said samples came back clean for bacteria.
Is that water main break being considered?
So I don't know that that's a smoking gun, but that is part of the timeline and part of the larger picture that we're looking at.
Nationwide, reports of Legionnaire's disease have climbed in recent years. No one is sure why, but factors could include better reporting, aging infrastructure, and climate change. There is concern among health officials that cases could really flare as buildings reopen after prolonged shutdowns during the pandemic.
Because that is a real consideration with water that has been sitting stagnant.
Nothing's working.
For residents at Rosemont Court, this issue needs to be addressed now. The uncertainty, the unknown.
And it's sad to see.
The lack of detailed information has dragged on too long.
Do something to help us. Help us because we're suffering.
We don't want to go through life psychologically thinking there's something to fear, something to doubt, something to be worried about.
4 days after our interview with residents, Northwest Housing Alternatives announced it would offer permanent relocation assistance to those living at Rosemont Court. They'll get one-on-one support to help move, if they choose. But only about half the residents are going.
And I like it.
For many, it's a tough decision. It's a move they really don't want to make. The pandemic has been hard enough.
Talk to all of you later.
And now they've got to leave their friends and the place they've called home.
Okay, let's talk to Kyle about this for just a second. And typically, in my mind, Kyle, when there's an outbreak at a specific kind of isolated location, I imagine that it erupts and then it goes away. They take care of it pretty quickly. Is it usual for something like this to last this long?
Yeah, I spoke with a water quality expert who specialized in Legionnaire's disease outbreaks and said it really depends. Sometimes you get lucky right out of the bat. You know where the source is and can fix it. Other times it can drag on and on and on. In fact, he pointed to a case at a veterans home in Illinois where people started getting sick around 2015. That outbreak dragged on for years and years and years. In fact, their most recent case was in December.
Wow. So when we think of this case here, what is next for these residents?
Yeah, so the nonprofit that owns Rosemont Court, they're working really hard to help those who live in the facility get out if they want to. They say about half the residents have decided to leave. The other half will stay for now. For those moving out, they're trying to help out as best they can as far as finding them a location to move to, helping with the physical move itself because a lot of these are seniors, and then also giving them some money to start with. For those who stay, they'll obviously have to continue to monitor this situation, test the water, and they hope those filters in the faucets will be enough to stop people from getting sick for the time being.
Just awful. All right, Kyle Aboshi, thank you. Meantime, why don't we count some vaccines? We like to do that every night. I like counting. It makes me feel smart. All right, let's count some vaccines. According to the CDC, 2.44 million Oregonians have gotten at least their first dose. That works out to, 68.9%. We're tiptoeing. We're getting close to 70. You think we'll get there by July 1st? Think we'll get there by July 4th? I'm not a betting man, but the governor does say when we hit that 70%, the state can fully reopen. It's going to take about 38,000 more people to get vaccinated for us to hit that mark. Now, in Washington, the state is reporting 4.17 million people with at least their first dose. That's 68% of the state's population 16 and older. That's the metric they're using in Washington. And they're aiming for 70% as well. But the governor says they are going to reopen at the end of the month, no matter what. All right, keep sending in the questions in the comments. Use that hashtag, Hey Dan. Tell us, what do you think of the show? What's on your mind? What should we cover? We're going to finish this thing up. I'll address a few of your comments right after this. All right, let's talk comments. Rob wrote in, anybody else still waiting, he said, to be able to order a hashtag Hey Dan t-shirt? No one else is wondering. It's you, me, and my mom. We want one. I don't know. Maybe I'll just order them and send them to you. Let me know your address. Jennifer writing in saying, if an officer on duty catches a driver running a red light and issues a citation, wouldn't they just be able to cite the driver for expired tags if that were also the case? You don't completely understand the chief's rationale. So they're just not prioritizing these things. It doesn't mean that it's impossible for them to still charge people with any of these infractions. They can, but depending on which kind of perspective you're giving the most attention to, the chief is saying it's simply because they don't have enough officers to spend time only writing a ticket for an expired tag. They have to prioritize other things. So that's what we're hearing. They're not completely ignoring these rules altogether. And then somebody else says, does our mayor have to tell the public about these new policies? From now on, nobody's going to be caring about renewing their license or preparing a brake light. And the latter is related to a safety issue. Hey, welcome to this conversation. Welcome to the side of the conversation where people are a little concerned with the way things are going. So the mayor, I don't think they have to tell us. Of course, somebody in the media would always get tipped off to it. That's our job, and then we would bring it up, and then it would look like he was hiding it. So, sometimes it's a smart move to come out and be front-facing with people on these policies. But, yeah, your concerns are valid, I think. And then, lastly, who sent this email? I don't have it. But somebody sent me in a cool picture from Oregon City in 2009. They took a picture of their thermostat when it said it was 108 degrees outside. I wonder if we are going to break that coming up. I hope not, but we might. Either way, it's going to be uncomfortable, whether it's 106, 107, 108, 109. Hey, I'll see you back here tomorrow.